Base building with Daisy. Building skills. Making slides. Setting up slides in your base is really very easy. And it just got easier. The first slide that was created that I knew of was by @Cloudless Night, who put together what they call the O-Rail, which was a horizontal slip-and-slide of sorts, made by chaining the letter O from the original alphabet letters together. These have an invisible barrier on the back of them that causes you to slip. This was followed by the discovery of a self-propelled version by @CrazyCat, who used the tops of barrels, and that was soon replaced by the tops of the heart in a jar item, which was shown to me by @GeoValia. This is a great small path item to use. But for wider paths, Easter Bunny discovered that fresh brains, which are in a row, are much more item economical to use because of their width, so it spans the entire path instead of having to use 3 or 4 jars to cover the same amount of space. I much prefer using the heart jar and the fresh brains, as they also disappear under things that cancel FX, which is usually water. All the slides I will show you also need to have guides of some sort to keep a player moving in the direction you want and not off to the side. Here is how you set up slides with either fresh brains, which will be a wider path, or the heart in a jar. The handles of the jars need to go across the path in order to propel the player forward. You need to place the items so that they are all going the same direction and are all the same height. They don't need to be too close. You can move fresh brains pretty far apart and still have a good slide, but usually setting your grid to the default of 1 is a good distance for spacing. They can move farther apart and not slow a player down, but that's a nice amount. So first, lay out a 4 to 5 item path with guides, and make sure you know which direction the items will push a player, and if the player is moving well. The newer collision walls are perfect to use as guides because they're invisible. Make sure a player's hitbox will fit on your slide, especially through the corners, and the Fit gizmo is the perfect tool for this. Once you're sure you've laid the slide the way you need it to be to get the effect you want, you will probably be able to work more quickly now that you have a better understanding of how to place the items. You need to make sure you have at least 4 in a sequence before you change direction or do a drop to get up sufficient speed. To change direction, it's wise to do at least a small level change so that the player box doesn't get hung up on jars going different directions. The player will hit the far side guide, and that's what makes them turn, along with the changed direction of the propel. So be sure that the inside guide isn't blocking the character from moving through the turn in any way. Jars must be level to work, so you can't angle the tops in order to slide down. It's really important that the guides have no edges that a player can run into, because the edge that can hang someone up is insanely small in size, so when placing guide edges, make sure that the edge the player is coming up on is always on the other side of the panel they're currently on. Now if you want to hide these jars, just place either bath or calm water over them, or also a slow field will work. All that needs to be showing for the jars to slide a player is the very top of the jar or the handle, so you can also sink them into the floor. You can place vegetation that has no collision over the top as well. Vegetation that has no collision includes reeds, large bush 1 and 2, agropanthus, and hanging vines, which are all tintable, and they are the ones that I use the most to cover things up. The last page issued brought new items which Easter Bunny and Garbage Wizard figured out how to use to produce more slides. Easter Bunny discovered that the edge of the collision walls will take you up along the edge. Sometimes you don't even need a guide wall to use this, but it's more consistent if you have one. I find that a 30 to 45 degree angle seems to work the best. Now, this upward slide will take you up at the speed at which you hit that edge, so sometimes it's good to have some propelling items before you hit that upward slide. Having the power of walk active tends to slow the player, or they end up going back and forth along the edge and sometimes don't make it all the way up the slide. But the movement of the slide is responsive to a player's movement keys, so pressing whatever you use to move forward will usually move you up the slide. So since you can move slowly, this would be a great thing to use for an escalator. But be aware there is a minimum height clearance the edge must have above a solid surface for it to work. The items that Garbage Wizard figured out could take a player up an incline are also letters. He says the backs of any of the new alphabet letters will work, but some work better than others, and the V shape seems to work the best. So here is a slide he put together as a demonstration using the Motiva medium V. There are 3 across, although using 3 is not necessary, and they're at a 45-degree angle, but he's gotten them to work at even a 1-degree angle. But having an angle is absolutely necessary. You cannot use these for a flat slide. And you can see by how my character goes up the slide, scoots to one side, you do need guides on either side for this. The more narrow the guides are, the less variation of the path the character will take. These letters, however, will not be invisible, although you can color them however you like, and of course, covering them with plants that have no collision is still an option. They might make a good roller coaster track. The advantage they have over a collision wall is that they are self-propelled, so you won't get characters stuck halfway up because you didn't have the speed, and no clearance is needed between the letters and the floor. Lastly, if you want to slide downwards, we finally have a way to do that too. Set your downward descent to whatever you like. That doesn't really matter as long as it's a slope. Here I'm setting it to 30 degrees. Angle 2 collision walls into a V shape. The angle of the V can be anything from even over 90 degrees to about 30 degrees. The wider the angle, the slower the descent. The slide is fairly easy to do, and you can make it into a spiral by placing surface or collision tiles at the desired angle downwards in a spiral. These are at a 30-degree slope, but you can have it be more or less. Use the walls placed in the spiral to position the collision walls into V's. When turning corners, the player is following that outside collision wall, so make sure the path is clear. The players will get hung up if there are any edges in the way of that turn, or if the collision wall that forms the side of the V that is on the inside of the spiral goes too far into the next V track down and blocks a player's path forward. You will probably have to work with it a bit to get a smooth and rapid descent, so test frequently. I should also say here that the player box, due to its width, will never be at the very bottom of the V, so you don't need to worry about how smooth that is. It's sometimes helpful to watch a character on the slide when you can see where the character is hitting those walls, so you can plan the path the best. By the way, you don't have to use collision walls. I've used these because they give you a slide that's already hidden, but using the V formation with 2 flat surface objects will give you the same effect. So that's how you make slides. I hope it helped. Thanks for watching.